First are the imports. Here are the imports you will need for random file access. Pulling from the Java I/O package, you'll need random access file, EOF exception, and IO exception. Alternatively, you could wildcard it with an asterisk and use the whole package. We're continuing to use our program shell and cover different types of file access. So we've been talking about sequential file access, writing entire arrays of objects and writing single objects and reading entire arrays and reading single objects sequentially. Now we're going to look at doing that the random access file way. Okay, so it's the same. We're using the same program, but we're going to do file access in a completely different way. If this is the first video that you're watching, then you may want to go back and see the intro videos where we talk about that, because I only talk about that once. I'm just trying to save time and keep it as brief as possible. But I do explain how everything works. All of these functions work here in the Navigator pane in the first few videos. Okay, so this is all about random file access, or random access files. So what are the things we need to import? Well, they're all from the Java I/O package. All right, and the things that we need specifically are EOF exception, IO exception, and random access file. Alternatively, you could simply wildcard it and use an asterisk and import the whole I/O package. We need these for random file access, and then we need something for input. I'm going to use a scanner. You could use a line number reader with try and catch. You could use a JOption pane, show input dialog, whatever you want to use there. Okay. Let's look at reading and writing single objects randomly. The basic process to write to a file randomly is, first, create a random access file object. Second, write the data to the file with the appropriate write function based on the object's data type. Here's some type-specific write methods. Write int writes integer data, write double writes double data, write UTF or Unicode text writes string data, write boolean writes boolean data, and write char writes character data. Once again, remember, I/O processes should always be enclosed within a try block, and for each I/O process, you should catch an I/O exception. So that being said, then let's jump right to the part where we're doing, some random access files, or binary file access. So we're going to go down to save person. All right, if I call save person, it calls save person binary. I'm going to jump down to save person here, or warp to it in the Navigator pane. And how does this work? Well, just like any other kind of file access, it's in try and catch. All right, and any I/O process, things can go wrong. Might not have permission, might not have room, might not be able to find the file, who knows? So it should be in try and catch. The kind of exception we always want to catch is an I/O exception. Now it's a bit more simplistic in terms of the initial instantiation process than sequential access. For writing, we had to worry about building three objects, and for reading, we had to worry about building 4 objects with a buffered reader. Notice here, it's just one object, a random access file. So we instantiate it, and we're going to call it, in this case, the name of the currently selected object, and we'll concatenate the file extension binary onto it, and it'll be read-writable. All right, so once we open it, we're just, checking to make sure it's not null. Don't want to get paranoid there, but it's always good to check, make sure the object's not null. We call select person. Well, select person, remember that takes care of all the validation. So by the time it gets done, it will have assigned, whatever the selection is. The num will hold the value of the object that we want to save. Okay. And again, I'm not going to go over that. If you need to know how that works, please check the previous videos. But I'm not going to do it in the subsequent videos because I'm trying to cut down the time so that it takes you, I don't want these to be like hours and hours long. I'm trying to keep them brief if I can. But that was explained at least once, and if you need to go back and see how that works, it's there for you. All we need to know for now is, okay, by the time we get down here, we have selected, a valid numerical value. It's not some crazy thing like banana that's non-numerical, and it's not outside the valid range. Okay, so once we get there, it's a legit object, and now we can begin to write it with our random access file. Well, we just have to serialize it now. So all that private data in the class via our public accessors, our gets up here, it's going to be serialized, and so ID, name, age, size, weight, occupation, location, and references. And just like with sequential access, when we serialize something manually, when we're not extending serializable, which we'll cover later, we need to be very careful and make sure that we read things back in the exact same order that we write them. Also, We didn't have to worry about this with sequential file access. It was all Unicode or ASCII text that we were writing with println. But when we do random access file objects, it's more binary, and we have to be very careful to use the right type of write and read method. So looking at the data types, ID is an integer, so we have to use write int. Name is a string, so Unicode text we have to call write UTF. Age is an integer, so we have to call write int. Size and weight are doubles, so we have to call write double. And then the last three are strings, so again we have to call write UTF. So be careful to call the right method based on the data type of the object that you are writing. Finally, we close our random access file object when we no longer need it. Again, we don't want to keep it open longer than we have to for safety purposes and efficiency. And basically we're done at this point actually writing or creating the file. So let's test that out. All right, we're going to go ahead and open up our database here, and we're going to call, well, first we need to add a person, so we will. Why don't we add a person here, and Charles, Germany, and age 42, and size 6'1", weight, and occupation, adventure, location, Hyrule, references, yeah, alright. So there's our record. Let's call save person. Alright, and we're set to the first record, just verifying. No other records here. Can go no further, that's the beginning. Can go no further, that's the end. But if I view, there I am. So I'm going to leave that selected. File saved successfully. I'm going to quit. And let's go look at or examine the contents of the file that was created. So here's the file that was created, right? It was my name concatenated to the extension binary right there. So if I were to open this in Notepad, we can make out some of the text, but you can see that it's not just a Unicode, or it's not just plain ASCII text or Unicode there. All right, there's formatting involved in the file. The basic process to read from a file randomly is first, create a random access file object. Second, read the data from the file with the appropriate read function based on the object's data type. Here are some type-specific read methods. Read int to read integer data, read double to read double data, read UTF or Unicode text to read string data, read boolean to read boolean data, and read char to read character data. Now, the next function we want to take a look at, now that we have saved a single object in random access style, let's look at loading a person in binary or random access style. So let me hop over here and load person by warp over there in function navigator if I can get it to, hey, come on, respond. Alright, so here's load person binary. And we're doing something very similar here. When we load the person, only this time we don't have to select it from the database. This time we have to get the user to type in the name of the object that they want. And this is really more of an import process because we have an unknown here. All right, there's an uncertain set of circumstances or situation. We don't know how many records they've instantiated or customized in the database, and so we want to be careful not to write over the current object. So we need to call count records and count up all the objects, and then we're going to import this single person object that they're going to load, and we're going to tack it on at the very end of all of the valid records in the database so that we're careful not to overwrite anything. So it's really more of an import process than loading, but so that's all we're doing here. We're counting the records. We want to get to the very end, make sure we don't overwrite anything that exists accidentally, and we'll tack it on at the very end. So hypothetically say that we had 50 records, then this would become record number 51. Okay, so we asked them for the name, and they typed the name. We store it in temp. We concatenate it to the file extension binary. So to load the file that we just wrote, it would be Charles space Germany, right? It's opened as read writable. And then we want to make sure that we don't exceed the capacity of the database. Remember, it only had 100. 100 was the number of elements or person objects populated that the array's been populated with, and that's the size of the array. So being very careful. Otherwise, we'll just, a message, hey, the database is full, you can't add more records. And then once we do this, we've instantiated a random access file. We successfully connected to it and opened it. We saved, yeah, we have to be careful to read things back in the exact same order that we wrote them. Well, remember the first line we wrote the ID. Well, the thing is down here, we need to read that and consume the character. That means that'll move the file pointer down to the next line, so that then these will be in the right position to be read correctly. Because every record, every person object consists of 8 lines. We're using a line as a delimiter right here. But we need to consume that sort of, or, I'm sorry, I'm thinking sequential, but anyway. But, we wrote these 8 here, and we have to read them back in the same order. Now, we can read this in, we can read it, but we don't really need to utilize it because we're going to reorder this, okay? We're going to reorganize it or reorder it. Whatever its previous ID was, doesn't matter. We're importing it. It could have been 25, but we have 50 records, and now it's going to be 51. You understand what I'm saying? So, in other words, we need to reorder the ID or reposition it so that we can tack it on at the end of whatever other records there are. So this is kind of our import function. And then everything else has to be, or needs to be, the same order. Name, age, size, weight, occupation, location, and references. Because we're, when we get to implementing serializable, we won't have to worry about it. It'll be like one line of code. But for now, when we're doing things manually, we have to be careful to keep things in the proper order. Then we just want to close the random access file. So let's test it out once again. And if I go here, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to display a person. And there's nobody there. See, I can't go previous, nobody there. I can't go any further. And if I go next, nothing there. No more people. There's nobody in the database, okay? So let me go back, and same thing. If I go previous, nobody there. If I go next, nobody there, okay? So just checking things out a little bit. Now let's load. And we're going to load a single person object, or import it into the database. Name of the person to load: Charles, Germany. Importing person with ID 0, file loaded successfully. And now let's go and display the person. Now there's one people in the database, or one person, Charles, Germany. And if I wanted to view, there I am selected. And now we can see previous. I'm the very first record. And there are no other records, okay? Alright, so there I am. There's all the data, just as it was. We'll take a look at reading and writing arrays of objects randomly. Now that we've taken a look at saving and loading a single object in a random access file, let's take a look at saving and loading an entire array of objects in a random access file. So we're going to take a look at this function. And when we select it from the menu, it's going to call save person binary array. And let's use the navigator pane to go there. So let's go down to save person binary array. We'll warp down there. And just like with a single object, everything's in try and catch because it's an I/O process. We have to catch an I/O exception. We have to instantiate our random access file. And there's no need to, pull the name from a single object because we're saving the entire array, all 100 person objects in this example. It's read writable. Now we do need to put it inside of a for loop because we have to take the length of people. In this case, remember that it has 100 elements or 100 person objects stored or populated within it, that have been built within it. Okay, so 100 times we'll loop and 100 times we'll do this. One record or one object consists of 8 fields. All right. So in this case, also it's just a good idea sometimes to check, make sure the object's not null. You wouldn't want to try to write or read something if it were null. Maybe that's a little paranoid. I don't know, because if you code it carefully, you wouldn't necessarily have to worry about that. But I kind of do that with if sometimes. And then the write process. Remember that it's a strongly typed or data type specific. So in this case, if ID is an integer, we have to use the function writeInt. Name is a string, so we have to, it's Unicode text, we have to call writeUTF. Age is an integer, we have to call writeInt. Size and weight are doubles, we have to call writeDouble. And then the last 3 are strings, Unicode text, so again we call writeUTF. Also, because we are not implementing serializable yet, we're manually serializing an object, we have to be very careful and cautious that we read things back in the same order in which we write them. So if this is the order that we wrote the information, then down here later when we read, we have to read it back in the same order. And so we shall. Okay? And once we do that 100 times, we've we've pretty much written the entire array, and we're done. All right. And once we do that, we can actually close the object. Oops. And I should, let's see, let me go down here. Hop it out of the array here. Why don't we close it? Yeah, we'll close our object there. Okay. So our object's closed. Let's build this and generate the file and test it real quick. Alright. And now we need to populate. We need to go ahead and instantiate or build some objects here. And so we shall. And Alright. And for the rest of these guys, I had a person who's going to do X, Y, Z real quick. So X, Y, and add another fourth person, Z. Alright, I'll give us an example. So let's look at if we call display person, it'll give us a count. 4 people in the database, and we can cycle through. I'll go back down to views. We'll cycle through them real quick. Alright, so there's the beginning, and then we'll go next, X, next, Y, and next, Z. And then you can see that's the end. No person to display at position 5. Okay? So just to verify everything, so let's go ahead and we're going to enter 0 to save the entire array of objects to a random access file. Alright, so we did that, and now we're going to quit. We're going to take a look at the file real quick. So let's go over here, and to look at the file, here's data1.binary array. And if we open that in Notepad, again, it's not plain text, but you can see, here's the formatting of the random access file in Notepad. Okay. So that was save person binary array. Now the next function we want to call is load person binary array. If that's how we save an entire array of objects in a random access file, how do we load an array of objects in a random access file? So we're going to go to load person binary array, and pretty much the same process. Everything needs to be in try and catch because it's an IO process. And oops, let me come down here and close my object as well when we get done. There. Alright, so same basic process in try and catch. We need to instantiate the random access file object. It's read write, same name, don't have to worry about the name or anything. Now it's in a for loop because we have to read in 100 objects. Remember, the array is of fixed length. It is, has been built with 100 person objects and populated with those objects. They were instantiated in the array. So we're checking to make sure it's not null, and then we simply have to read things back in the exact same order that we wrote them. ID, name, age, size, weight, occupation, location, references. And the same thing here. ID, name, age, size, weight, occupation, location, and references. Again, we have to watch the data type in the same way where we had to call the right, or the correct write method, we have to call the correct read method, okay? And so because ID is an integer, we have to call readInt. Because name is a string or Unicode text, we have to call readUTF. Because age is an integer, readInt. Size and weight are doubles, we have to call readDouble. And occupation, location, references are strings, so we have to call readUTF, the proper or appropriate method. This cycles through all 100 objects. Remember that every 8 reads represents a record, okay, or an object. And then we move on to the next object where X is incremented in our for loop. Okay, and then finally we close it. So, fairly straightforward in terms of how you would both save, and load an entire array of objects via a random access file. So let's, again, try it out. Remember there were 4 objects, so let's run it again. And if we check, I'll call display person, there are 0 people in the database, right? So we're verifying this. Now let's go ahead and we'll enter 1 to load an entire array of person objects in a random access file. So we've loaded the entire array. Now if I call display a person, I'll do this, and notice there are 4 people in the database. I'm going to quit with the first person selected, and notice we're at the beginning. That's beginning of array, can go no further. So now I'm going to next. So there's person 1, 2 is X, 3 is Y, 4 is Z, and there's the end of the array. Okay.